The Civil War abolished slavery, but the fight for African American freedom was not over. The federal government did not grant African Americans citizenship or equal rights following the war. And African Americans refused to let freedom and the fight for equality fade from view. Across the nation, they gathered to celebrate the abolition of slavery and assert their rights to education, fair labor, legal protections, and the vote. On plantations, in small towns and cities, African Americans acted on their own behalf. They built schools, churches, and businesses. Visible displays of independence and achievement. Yet hostility toward Black Americans was still pervasive, and the state governments passed laws resembling slavery. African Americans in Virginia spoke out. We have no right to testify before the courts in which a white man is one of the parties to the suit. We are defenseless before our enemies. Give us the suffrage to secure justice for ourselves. Under President Andrew Johnson, there was no federal protection, and African Americans became targets of terrorism. Their symbols of freedom went up in flames. Outraged, Congress took control and divided the South into military districts, requiring those states to write new constitutions and ratify the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. At the local level, African Americans continued to push for equal rights. They demanded civil rights and celebrated the passage of the 14th Amendment, which granted African Americans citizenship and equal protection under the law. And they pressed for the right to vote, which was secured in part by the 15th Amendment. With the vote, African Americans ushered in change and held elective office in every southern state. They instituted the South's first public school systems, fair labor laws, and debt relief. With more than 1,500 African American men in elected office, Black voters recognized the impact of the political power they now held. They pressed to expand American freedoms in the House and in the Senate. Representative Robert B. Elliott, speaking to the House of Representatives, said, "It is a matter of regret to me that it is necessary at this day that I should rise in the presence of an American Congress to advocate a bill which simply asserts equal rights and equal public privileges for all classes of American citizens." Uncomfortable with Black citizenship, the Supreme Court began to chip away at equal rights. Terrorist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan waged war on African Americans and their political allies. They formed armed combat units to block polling places and fire on Black voters. Many were murdered without consequence as they tried to cast their vote. Reconstruction came to an end when Democrats swept the South during the 1876 presidential election using fraud and violence. The Republicans did not fight back. They compromised. In exchange for the presidency, Rutherford B. Hayes agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South. This left African American voters defenseless against murder and fraud. Elections were stolen, and Black representation nationwide was stripped. Some African Americans resisted by leaving the South. Others stayed to nurture the communities they had built. African Americans continued to claim the right to belong. Each year, on Emancipation Day, they took to the streets, Together, black labor unions, churches, fraternal orders, and women's clubs organized parades to celebrate emancipation while calling attention to the promises made, but not yet fulfilled.